G'day, I'm Ali Ammo, and this is the Lease on Life podcast. I've recently written a book called Detangling the Web of Life, the complete guide to understanding you and everyone else. It's all about this crazy philosophy of mine called the web of life. You may have heard that concept before. Some people have, some people haven't. But I thought, why the hell not? Just whip out a potty to bring the philosophy and the book to life and start a conversation with the world. So in our last episode, we started to explore the time strand, which is beliefs and history, because you cannot talk about one without the other. Today, to dive deeper into not only the beliefs element, but particularly the history element, I have with me gastro. Cut that. So today, to explore the time strand, more so the history element, but you will have your beliefs challenged guaranteed, I have Geo-astro-archaeologist Larry Dean Hunter. Larry is an independent researcher who patented the pyramids back in 1984 as he rediscovered the truth about the form and purpose behind them. But before you get to know him as an expert on Egypt, let me quickly tell you how it was that I was introduced to Larry, who I call Laz, by the way. I was in Egypt and I was speaking to a tour guide who said to me, "You're asking a lot of questions. You want to know the truth about Egyptian history." And of course I did. Who would want to know lies? And he said, "I can't tell you, but I know someone who can." Before he said anything else, I had the same question. I'm sure you would too. Why would an Egyptian tour guide in Egypt be telling me he can't tell me the truth? So I asked him, "Why can't you tell me?" And he said, because he'd lose his license to practice as a tour guide. And he said, "But the person I'm putting you in contact with, he will tell you the whole truth about Egypt. He's the expert." So with that, let's say hi to Larry Dean Hunter, coming from all the way in the US. How are you, Laz?
Fine. Thank you very much for inviting me for this moment in presentation. That was a nice introduction. Thank you.
No, that's all right. That barely scratches the surface with all the things I could say about you. Well, for those that don't know you, can you give us a quick rundown of where you get the knowledge of your geo, the astro, and the archaeology from?
Well, they're accumulated life experience sciences that I like to think of. Geology, we learn from kindergarten, first grade, dinosaurs, uh, uh, the Grand Canyon, strata, all kinds of things. And my parents, they were rock hounds, and they used to take us in the desert and hunt for rocks, amethyst, and the volcano, a lot of things like that. So I had that part of me as an interest from a child. Then I went into the Navy and I got into astronomy, navigation, moving ships. So I got the astronomy part down pretty well as my career would carry it. And then you get into the third one, archaeology, and that was to dig into the past of the ruins of our civilization. So I use geo-astro-archaeology to rewrite my mind of the myth truths that have been fed me from a child till now. And I'm 73 years old, and I've been about 45 years in this journey of the subjects that we're embracing today. And I could go from A to Z, but we're only going to pick out one little piece called the Great Pyramid for clarity today. Or we'll be here for weeks trying to talk about everything that's necessary to fully grasp this. So that's sort of my purpose in this, and I hope that Elise can ask some fine questions that will trigger the words that are necessary to convey what it is that I've got locked away, and hopefully I don't get hit by a car in my head. And it's on tape now, so hopefully it'll be a good thing of memory for people to listen to in the years ahead.
So I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked everybody else in the last episode. What are your beliefs about the Pyramids of Giza?
Well, first I have to see, and I hate to use it this terms, nothingness into something requires thought. And I'm interested in the thoughts that were necessary to render such a building. And the smallest part is the little tiny aggregate stones that make up the buildings and structures that we see. So that's where I ended up getting interested in the Great Pyramid, not only the nothingness into something, because as a navigator, it embodied all the sciences that I was using today in the 20th century that was expressed in a geological form called the Great Pyramid. And you're going, what? How is this? So my first trip I wanted to be there on June 21st, summer solstice, sunrise. I calculated the time, its position, and I went. And I stood on the third little pyramid on the east side, and I watched my Elgin clock, and boom. Oh my God, the pyramid is still working to this day. Calculating from me in America, carrying my watches, going through with a backpack, and they busted in the airport, and all my things are trailing down the little track there. They must have had fun going through everything. They busted some compasses and things. This is when Egypt, you had to have guards everywhere. Even to go to the toilet, I had to have a guard take me, believe it or not. So the pyramid got my focus, and 45 years later, hopefully I can trigger enough memories to keep on focus instead of getting into so many aspects of it.
So, one thing I think is important to sort of explain just right off the bat, you have over 40 years of time periods going back and forth from the US to Egypt. And how many trips did you say you've had roughly in that time?
Over 45.
And you'd spend not short periods of time in Egypt and not like a tourist either. You were more exploring like an archaeologist or an astronomist or a geologist, right?
The trips would depend on purpose, would last my first trip 6 days. I ran out of money. And then the next ones or so, I would stay 2, 3 months, a week, a month, like this, depending on resources and things of that nature.
So, what I love about your knowledge about Egypt, it hasn't come from books or from teachings in institutions, we'll say. Your level of knowledge is your own experience and also ground level experiences from talking to actual Egyptian people, some whose history is centuries in a specific area, whether it was around the actual pyramids themselves or spread around Egypt. And the amount of people that you know, even still to this day, can be generations after the initial relationship that you formed with people.
Well, you remember I'm only 29 years old when I'm first going, and I've just gotten out of the United States Navy, and it was actually because of the Great Pyramid that I left the Navy. They didn't have orders or billets that would assign me there. And so I went. And the first time, you don't know. I don't know how to say. It's like a homing pigeon. You're there, and it's a magical time. You're neither early nor late. You're exactly at the place and the time you need to be. This is part of the life thing that you're talking about, that spider web. We have our little homing birds or pigeon feelings inside the, what is it, certain magnetism that draws us to these places.
Agreed.
Um, okay, so I'm there, and I already had started to think about the Great Pyramid as a processor of sunlight. But this
Why?
is, well, I had read a book, what is it?
Was
Daniel
it
Brinkley, I guess it was, wrote the book. What was the book he wrote?
was it in the 1920s he wrote that one?
No, no, no. Daniel, the UFO guy, the German guy. I'm confused here for a minute. Anyway, he recommended the book Great Pyramid by David Davidson. It's Divine Message, if you wanted to know more. And so I took and went to the library and I picked this book up. It wasn't easy to find. And so then I started reading it. And in the reading of it, I got a whole different understanding of the Great Pyramid. It was a piece of geometry, and from the levels where I would come to know nothing into something comes by thought. Everything in that building required thought. The passages, the slopes, the indentations, the facets of 36 of them all around the pyramid weren't clearly visible, but through gravitational astronomy and going backwards, I could rebuild this building with the sciences that I have today. But then to go back and figure nothing into something, who in that time could do such a thing? And that was sort of the purpose.
That sparked your curiosity.
Yeah, and not only that is that it allowed me to really, really embrace a perfect stone that really it was amalgamated in harmony with the universe. But what was missing was why. Now, David Davidson in his book was an excellent astronomer navigator and all the people around him, and the book was fabulously written. And he showed the sun at different positions and how the reflections would go in the morning and in the afternoon and through the different seasons. But he never told you collect that reflection and focus it back to a point would be a power center. And so then I'm sitting here, this is so easy. Why doesn't anybody see such a simple thing that this pyramid is working in harmony with the sun, and those reflection patterns that move with the sun, and angle of incident and angle of reflections, and stabilizing the beams of light because of the canting that we see in the cracks, and sciences that really people didn't even ask to this day, why are they there? But when you go and you look, they are functions of gravitational astronomy over 25,000 years. You go, what? 25,000? The Egyptian civilization's not that old, is it? Mm. But this building is encoding that particular aspect of our orbit around the sun called precession. Now, when you look at that, you have 12 zodiacs and it's a sphere, and that all the gravitational astronomy is in this building. So over this period, and it goes around and comes back, the snake in Egypt where it bites its tail, that's the end of the cycle and the beginning of another one, because the pyramids, diagonals, if you add those two together, it gives you the value. Not that man had to rediscover it or figure it out. The answer was already in stone. Same as our solar year, the exact number of days, the 36524, is already the blueprint of the pattern that it sits in. So when you put all this gravity, astronomy constants together, and the pyramid is an expression of them, wow, now you get to go, where did this knowledge come from? It isn't an observational science because nobody can tell me that somebody waited 25,000 years to say, yes, we're back at the same point. Einstein might have his rediscovered math constant that 286.1 is the value of every year slipping until it comes back to 25,000 and the years of our precession. Rediscovered, already in form and utilized inside that building. So I became more and more and more impressed with all of this, so much so that I wrote patents and put them in 7 countries around the world to revive this technology for humanity today. And you see it around the planet, not that I'm getting too much into this, but you see the power towers that have mirrors sending light to the fire, and they're heating steam or water or oil or molten salts to store, to generate turbine electricity to power Las Vegas cities in the vicinity and all around the world. There's a lot of applications. So look up power tower and you'll see the origins of mirrors and light and focus coming off of the knowledge that I produced to my government through patents, and they stole, utilizing it on a global level today. But if they get past that level and go into pyramids, then they'll start to understand why there's pyramids all around the planet. I ask you as a group, blink your eyes once, listening. In that one blink of an eye, light travels 7.5 times around this planet, stitching every major pyramid complex in the world as one powerful planetary system of energy. No coal, no fuel, no nuclear, all sunlight. It's free, but why we don't
Mm.
have it? Mine is the rebirth. Mine is the age of light. Now I'm going to jump up just a little bit to give the magnitude of this subject. It travels in a lot of directions. Religions is one of them, and religions are always talking about prophecy and stone and blah, blah, blah. So when you see the pyramid and you see that it is the revelation that all of our civilization has been talking about, the past civilizations, 6,000 years, incubation, end of it, man loses his free will. We're at that point, close. But what I'm trying to get at is that the Great Pyramid, in some aspects of its allegory, represents the body of Jesus Christ. Not Jesus Christ, I mean the subject. When Jesus would say, only through me can you get to the Father. And only through this process of this Great Pyramid and all of its dimensions can you get to true light. So there are allegories and things that sort of run around in your noggin, and you're just overwhelmed by looking at history so differently, but from a scientific, mathematical, and when you think of the knowledge of the pyramids, it's universal. So to me, I have to see God is the God of many worlds. And when I see someone coming into this planet that will study the oblate spheroid's orbital data around that star, and then convert that information into a form to control the energy of the sun on that ball of a planet spheroid, that's universal knowledge. Now, if I went to Mars, I will find a higher pyramid because its orbit is over 500 days. Ours is 365. So playing with those dimensions and mechanics, this knowledge will travel with civilization, and it was birthed here as well. So long ago, you need another book to go back here and here and here before we can match what I'm just saying to you as far on understanding. It's a long story, and it has a longer future.
So your beliefs about the pyramids being a power source for the planet is not just centered around the pyramids of Giza. It's actually all the pyramids of the world were all built with this purpose in mind.
The Great Pyramid was the zero. Like Greenwich Mean Time is the zero for our broadcast universal mean time system. The Great Pyramid is supposed to occupy that spot. Everything else is laid out by it, not England.
Well, when I was in the what do they call it? The main chamber of the Great Pyramid, I was told by I call them the temple guardian, when he put me up against the wall because of that crazy experience that I've told you about, the first thing he said to me is that I'm at the like centermost energy focal point of the planet. And that kind of blew my mind. And I just thought that it was aligned with the star in Orion's belt and thought that was sort of the whole point. But there's a lot more to it. Can you
That's the
explain?
shaft. The shaft in the king's chamber would go to that star. Yes, but what you got to see now, you're getting into the dimensions of this civilization that lived in the times of the pyramid. Now, we haven't really talked about age and who built it, but in the time that it was built, I have a feeling that human beings were the levels of giants in the size. The planet's gravity was a little bit different. And so it's hard to imagine the dragonfly with 15-foot wingspans, but we have them in the geological record, yes?
Hmm. Yes.
So when you time travel to those dimensions and you have to sort of reconstruct before the flood and the impact of the comet that sort of changed it all 65 million years ago, that's hard to grab a knowledge of the pyramids removed from an impact of a comet or meteor that disassociated its function for 65 million years. Because today we're back, but knowledge of them is long gone. And so we have the myths of Pharaoh and Khufu and Khafre and the family and the feuds and Isis and Steal My Name and all the black magics and stories that keep everybody fascinated with romantic Egypt. I'm interested in the scientific Egypt.
However, you'd also be in the same boat as me where you've gone to sites in Egypt that supposedly don't exist anymore, or that you've actually been cut off access to. At one place I was at, I think it's called Abu Sir or Abu Gharab, I was told that the reason that that place was mostly shut down is because the hieroglyphs on the major stones that were on the ground tell a very different story of Egyptian history than the mainstream public is led to and allowed to and supposed to believe.
They won't let you see the seashells that are on the blocks or the buildings. They are told break them. I showed a policeman. The first thing he did, pick up a rock and bust. I swear I'll never show you another one of these seashells again. But that's part of the thing when you get into the geo-astro-archaeology part. Now you're into astronomy and you're into the myths and cultures of histories gone by. When you read the stories of Osiris and Isis and Horus and Thebes, and then you get into some weird curse, they can't be born in any day of the year. And there's 360 days to our Earth orbit then, not 365. So there was a shift in time between that orbit and the philosophy of the story of Isis and Horus is that they could only be born not in the day, any day in the year. So they, at that moment, created the difference between a solar year and a lunar year. And it's a day, it's 50 minutes. And if you accumulate 50 minutes times 144 days, you'll get 5 extra days. So the Thoth and the people at time before Osiris and all them in the myth of it, they added 5 days to the calendar. So now you have 365 days, which is the encoded format of the Great Pyramid. So somewhere back in myth, the myth and the rituals, they hold science, but you got to see it for science, not for some, well, his brother had sex with his sister and they created a Horus from a plastic or wax phallus that when he was killed by his brother. I mean, these are really awesome stories to read, but that's what you go back through in time. But me, I took it to the science side of it, and I could see astronomical shifts that changed our orbit to express what's in the constants of the pyramid. And when it took a whack 65 million years ago, nothing was working. None of the mirrors and the alignments. And then with the facts of the water, when the comet hit, it flooded all the way to Noah's boat. If you look for a global a level of water, that's 7,000 mile or feet or a mile or more above today. If you stand in Egypt and you look up, you got to go through a mile of water when Noah's boat is sitting up in Turkey. That's another dimension of where we're at because remember, there's Noah, there's before Noah, and then there's today. And today is misinterpreting everything of the past. So it keeps it 12,000 years and you really don't see anything. So they control us by this.
Well, when you look up trying to date the pyramids alone, the most I've ever seen it be expanded to was 12,000 years, but that was very controversial. It usually is 4 to 6,000 that you see mostly, which seems a little bit odd because the information that you've alluded me to just about how much knowledge is encoded in the pyramids and all of the laws and the forces and the information that is expressed through the pyramids as well, that's too little a time frame for all of that knowledge to be gained and thought of and represented that way.
Well, I
So
would ask the question. This question is that Scripture gives different levels of the unfolding of the nations of the highways, the highways of the nations of the world. All right, this civilization would exist for so long, then this one would be, and then this one would, and they give a timeline of all these civilizations. I find it ironic that those lengths of time coincide with the geometrical fixed forms of the passages in the Great Pyramid, ascending up and descending down. There's a prophecy involved here, according to the researchers, going back to 0 or 6,000 AK or Anno Chaldean by calendars. this is a little much, but in what I'm saying is that
This is something you've seen yourself personally, though,
I,
correct?
I have by inch by inch by inch traced history through this building as they had written it, but they came into an error, and where they expected by what was being written that
Just a
God
sec.
would
Can
be
you
here.
paint a picture for people in their minds as to where this is in the Great Pyramid and what it is and what it looks like?
All right, everybody, he can go inside, and he starts in the ascending passages, and he goes up. Now, when he gets to the level of the Grand Gallery at that split where it becomes 153 feet before you get into another door, Scripture says this is the period of the fishers of men, where the time of Jesus is at that intersection where the passages come up, and then it goes horizontal back into the Queen's chamber. But then this hall is 153. So the geometry in the pyramid is mirroring words in the scriptures that sort of now was, I know the pyramids are way, way old. And I know the Bible is a rewrite, or it's trying to grab these numbers and tell history different, because the chronology of time, it shows when, all right, this you can check out. Davidson, he makes the thing that in August 21st, 1953, that, and more or less, that's the when you smack into the wall of the king's chamber, if you know what I'm talking about. When you go in and the coffer's over to your right, and if you went straight, you would hit the wall. Then you would have the wall. You know what I'm talking about in the room?
Yeah, you have to actually duck under a
This right.
like a block that's actually blocking you from walking in as your height. Even though the little central passageway that you're walking up is massive, it then hits and you've got to go down and under. So that's what you're talking about.
And
Yeah?
then when you come into the king's chamber, an inch, an inch, an inch is a month of time. So you come into the middle and you have 1945, the explosions of the nuclear ideas. And then it goes on and on and on when you follow history, an inch, an inch, an inch. Then you hit the wall. Now, this book was written in 1928, and I'm looking at it in 1984. All right. Why 84? In my reading and studies, I'd always knew that this prophecy in stone thing was there, but I never knew what occurred on that day in history. So I didn't bother with it. So after I got the patent, Larry, you're patented to control sunlight using the geometry of the pyramid, blah, blah, blah. Then I said, Larry, you're worthy to go and look at what this happened. So I went to the Pasadena Library, got the microfiche. Amazing what happened on that day.
Can you tell me what you actually saw in the inch increments to display the
History unfolding. History unfolding.
but what were you actually seeing in the pyramids to allude to a historical moment that was going to take place?
Well, you have an end by Davidson's time sequence. He hits the wall, and okay, there's no more inches. This day is defined by all this prior physics. So he hits August 1920 or 2021, 1953. So you have to go now. It's time. Look, the United States government overthrew the government of Iran this day. And so history, it sort of went,
Came
but
to a
me,
standstill.
well, it was Davidson in 28 talking about this, August 1953, and I'm up here in 84 reading this and looking backwards. All right. So now I look at this geometry of this building, and there's a lot of it. I needed to get from the floor of this room, King's Chamber, and I know that all the passages are straight to the east. In one, like an ant hill, if you had glass, you could see every one of them.
Yep.
So in this way, whenever you're coming up and you get to the king's chamber, if you took a plumb and you drop it straight down, how far do you go and where will you be when you get there?
Okay, yeah.
So I took the King's Wall, I dropped the plumb, and so now there's a little tunnel in the bottom of the pyramid called a dead end passage. All right. Now, in this one, it's 29 by 31, not very big, inches converted. 31 is not even a meter. All right. So when we're going back, we're going to go back, and this thing, how long do you think he is?
I wouldn't
52
think you would.
feet. You
Okay.
would be meters, and it only sort of reveals itself by certain things. 52 feet and 10 inches is the actual length of that passage. Now, whenever August 1950, we overthrew Iran, we installed the Shah by the CIA and a whole bunch of stuff. And you can go back and read this in the newspapers. That's how I knew about it. Not that news told me to look, because I see it in the news today. Yeah, we're celebrating the time when the U.S. backed the unit and put in the Shah. Well, all these years later, and the dictator is being mean and blah, 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 they overthrow this government. And he is in from this coming down. I'm 13 feet inside by the plumb line. All right. When I drop, now I go inch by inch by inch by inch by inch by inch by inch. And I catch the history from 1953 all the way to as far as I really wanted to look.
This was
Can
the
you follow
tunnel
what
that
I'm
you were crawling through, is that right? In the dark?
Yes, because at the end above my head is the Ark of the Covenant in a room that's over 200 feet straight up, and you can hear people in the king's chamber through this echoes of this room at the very bottom that has a void all the way up. All right. So and I'm first time there. It's like I have no candles, I have no flashlight, and I'm going woo because I don't want to hit the wall. And then all of a sudden, the whoo whoo to hear the sound comes, but it's coming from behind me. Hey, I just left that room. Why is my whoo whoo echoing in the subterranean chamber? So I go a little bit more, and then whoo whoo, and then I hear it. It's going in both directions. I'm hearing echoes here and behind me. This isn't in any book. So I'm dark and I don't want to hit the wall. And so when I get out to the end, it's like, vroom, vroom. I mean, the sounds are like,
Mhm.
this can only happen in a void. It's not solid rock. What is this? So I had a lot of experience down here. And during this day, if you want to read this, you have to go to my website, larryhunter.com, and go down to the parts that are my old website because some lady messed it up and it's not what I like today. But another story going on.
We're
This
getting
was
that
my
updated slowly, yes.
yeah, but see when you say the pyramid and me, we're amalgamated. Even this is crazy. I don't rough anybody, but this little rock here, I got this at the moment that I sat up after that pyramid scanned my body. Whoa, why me? Who are you talking to? You don't know, but you talk, and things are going on. And here you've been out there. I know you know the watches of old. They had the little radium dials where you put a flashlight and you go in your room and it's dark. Ah, I can still see. This watch, I just wanted to know what time is it, and I went like this. But on the way like this radium was so bright that it made green light in the end of this period. But these are the things that drove me in following the pyramid. Passages, future, prophecy, everything. It's more than you can put in one simple book.
So when you were hearing the echo, that's when you discovered the secret room in the Great Pyramid, is that right?
Correct.
And that
I
was
didn't know
in
it was before 1979.
79, not 84.
No, that was my first trip there. That's when I got altered.
But because you had that knowledge of echolocation from your time working as a
Common
naval,
sense.
yeah,
Common sense.
not everybody
Echoes.
knows the things that you know when it comes to the science of these things, but you had an understanding of the echoes and what that actually meant, and you were able to work out that there was a void, like an open space in between where you were in the king's chamber that you weren't aware of up until this point.
And that if you took 250 divided by 3, what are we talking about? 40, 50 meters? No, it's more than that. Divide 2,860 by 36. Oh, I don't even have the computer on because I've got things to do to slow it down or not get interfered with. Anyway, there's a lot of geometry here. And the discoveries like this are unique to the individual. Yeah, I don't want to get off onto the wilds of it, but I wanted the Egyptians to know about this because it to me was very, very important. And when actually the first day that I left here and I went up, I was afraid because I could hear people and I'm sure they could hear me. So when I'm ready to go out, I'm afraid people are going to say, "Oh, you're the guy that was just talking down in the bottom of the pyramid." But somehow when a guard came, every light in the pyramid went off. And he says, "Stay here." I go, "Uh-uh." So I went out the gate and into the black of the pyramid with no power. And you've been in there maybe when it shuts down, there's no electricity.
My experience was when they did that on purpose, and then we had a very crazy experience. So,
Okay, but it's black is black, isn't it?
oh yeah, yes,
Now,
until things start happening. But yeah,
people turn their cell phones on, and whenever I see them at times, they look like airplanes coming down the causeway or the gallery down like because there's no power in the building. But anyway, I ran out, and the first thing I saw was the guard of that very prominent Egyptian, and long story behind him. But I said, "Let's get some dynamite and go down there and open it. There's a secret room in the bottom of the pyramid." So that was me as the little kid at 29 years old, and having just experienced that and not knowing a damn thing about anything, I had to learn real fast. So from then on, I knew the solar part, the suns and the pyramids, but I didn't know the rest. And then I didn't know that they were older than 6,000 years or older. You know, that was the journey of 45 years and trips.
I'm going to cut this out, but be mindful that every little sound that you're making gets recorded over the top of you. So just be aware of touching things and whatever. All right. Sorry.
I was holding a notepad.
Oh, all right. So
This is
with
detailed stuff.
everything that you've told me so far, what I've noticed is the things that you've come to understand weren't easy for you to share with people in whatever capacity they were in Egypt and beyond. What were some of the challenges that you faced in trying to share your knowledge or experience with people?
The scientific director of the Great Pyramid, I met her, I think, in 2017 on a trip to Egypt, and I gave her a tour of the Great Pyramid. I showed her the cornerstones, where they were, and the distance between them and what's missing. I showed her seashells that were on the blocks of the pyramid, and I had her in she had me there for a conference, or more or less to have her students listen, you know, because she's a director. And in that, I was trying to show them that it was a solar power processor, and it was supposed to be like an hour, but she stayed with me for hours, hours. She wouldn't let me go. So I took her outside and I used a little flat Fresnel lens and lit a cigarette, and just to show them that just from the sunlight, you can. And I threw the cigarette, and they're going, "No, no, let me have it." It was sort of a funny moment. But in that, I took her around and I showed her the indentations and explained the light and reflections and the scientific aspects of this building. And she was so nice because she knew I had a boat ride from friends to go on the Nile. And so she took me back, drove me from her office all the way to my flat and this and that. But long story short, fantastic person. We were talking about these things, and I let her listen to my journey with the pyramid where the lights went out and I was all alone for over an hour. And she listened to that tape and it scared her, you know. But so we were going, and then we finally got to the point, and I says, you know, and I'm not going to mention her name, but I says, you can't talk about these things. Just like you introduced this with your friend that was the tour guide.
Mm.
We can't say these things. And I told her, you know, you can't talk about these things that I've just told you about. They'll fire you. And she said, yes, I know. And then she looked at me and she says, but you have a very important book to write. So from the scientific side, they know as well, but they can't say because right now they're doing all this cosmology fuons or muons to find secret rooms. Why can't they catch this big 250-foot room when they're over here just finding a little tube going out to the front of the building? And people have been in there before because those shafts going up and the trash they were finding, somebody's put trash in from someplace else. It shouldn't be there. This is sort of when you watch these videos go up and the things they find, it's like, aha, we see the thieves now. And they've been here, but they don't never tell you. And then this little thing is like a free, uh, we're going to get your attention. Come to Egypt. We found a new room. Oh, well, why don't you tell them about the Ark of the Covenant and all the names and the doors that go out that lead to the Sphinx? And under there, you can go to 9 cities in this area from underneath this pyramid. You won't tell them any of this. So back to
Why
you.
can I ask you why you think, with all your knowledge and knowing that it is purposefully and in many ways strategically suppressed, why do you think this knowledge is not being made public and people who do share bits and pieces of these facts are sort of pushed to the fringes, if that makes sense?
Oh,
Why do you
it's the
think
it's the way. It's the heretic if you don't say Khufu built this and Khafre and Menkaura. But they're just names and they're not the ones that built it. They're part of a system that is basically a reflection of the Orion constellation itself. And when you look to the Orion constellation and then you look at where it's pointing to and it shows Taurus and the bull and the Pleiades, you have all these myth stories coming in of the people that built the pyramid came from here and there and what. But then if you look to Sirius, it's only 8 light years away. It's very close. And the Dogon tribes in Africa, and this is what I'm saying. You just touch a button and I gotta hush up.
Well, can I ask you then, who do you think built the pyramids?
DNA would tell me we did. We have a DNA link back to them. Whether we were giants and we got small, I'm not saying. But that DNA and my DNA, they're the same. And the DNA has the information. I'm just
Just like
reawakening.
the DNA of the pyramids is all of this information about, well, what is the actual, can you go through really quickly? You mentioned Fibonacci to me before.
Mm.
You mentioned the circumference of the Earth, the distance to the sun. Can you explain in a nutshell all of the information encoded in the DNA of the pyramids?
All right. It is designed to be in harmony with the sun. And in order to do that, you have to establish math constants that will always capture the sun, whatever time of the day, whatever season, whatever year, over 25,000 years. They didn't build for 7 or 10, they built for eternity. As long as the planet kept those constants, this civilization would have power. That's the bottom line. So, whenever you have that kind of introduction to a planet and something breaks, and that knowledge is gone. There are no more teachers. There are no one who understand the physics of all of this. Only by focus and looking at the 250 million years to go around the Milky Way and see 65 before and after, can you start to play in the field that we're talking about. Humanity, the origins of civilization, who built the pyramids, who put us here? Do you think we just came from an amino acid and we evolved to build pyramids that reflected the constants of the universe? Come on.
If you look at science and what people are being taught as children and as adults in all the institutions, it's very much focused on evolution like that. Yeah.
Well, I am at the point where I'm content by my knowledge. You don't go and write a US patent and put it in England and France and Italy and all the major, even in Australia, if you go look at, you'll find my patents there to bring this knowledge because it's a universe, Earth commensurate system that, I mean, don't we have ruins in Australia? The Aborigines run certain lines and nobody can see them, but they know they're there. And these are like the pigeons that have that little magnetism that they can feel or whatever. They're just attuned to their environment. Are they a
Oh,
bunch of
absolutely.
stupid?
They
I
had
mean,
they have Dreamtime stories. Well, their creation stories talk about the Milky Way, and I remember hearing one where parents were dancing on the edge. No, the women were dancing on the edge of the Milky Way, and there was a baby in. It's the equivalent of a bassinet, if that makes sense, made of wood, and the baby fell off the Milky Way and crashed onto Earth upside down so they couldn't see the baby. And the story was this is what they tell children between the ages of 6 and 12. So as in their culture with their storytelling, as you progress in age and get into certain developmental stages, the story unfolds deeper and deeper and deeper. But this
uh,
is what they tell the 6 to 12-year-olds. And this was well, their history is, I think they've gone around 60 to 90,000 years in our civilization. That's what they've found evidence of. That's what they're saying.
and Göbekli Tepe is only 12. Oh, it's the world's oldest. There's
And that's
conflict everywhere.
the indigenous people of Australia are the oldest living civilization we have on this planet. But the story goes that the morning star and the evening star, the reason that you can see them day and night and they're always out is because those are the parents always looking for their baby, which was the meteorite that crashed onto Earth. So
Or
this is what they've been.
it's Venus, because Venus can only be seen in the daytime and morning and evening because it never will get on the outside and the backside of us. So it could be Venus too.
They just called it the morning and the evening star rather than because
And
they're
Venus is that. Venus is the morning star because it's
but you can
internal to the
see.
orbit of
Well,
the
you
Earth
can
and the
see
Sun.
the way their storytelling is that they've got deep astrological knowledge to explain how a celestial body made its way to Earth, and it makes sense. It's a story that is perfect for a 6 to 12-year-old child.
For Australia, yes, and that's what I'm saying. Follow the myths. There's more to them than just mythical stories. Where the Aborigines are explaining their methodology to their children of something that there's no written languages in their culture, is there?
So how did they know this information? They weren't transcribing things like the
That's sort of my point. That's
yeah.
word of mouth, and as you grow up.
But as we were
Now,
talking about already, there's evidence with the iron bark that made the I think it was a boomerang that they
it's all
found.
over. That's in Egypt
That's
too. Has them.
yeah. There's evidence that the Egyptian civilization and the Aboriginal civilization actually crossed paths, whether they came to Australia here or they went there or both. But
Or Atlantis was going there before Egypt was Egypt the first time. Who? Because see, we've got to. We didn't sort of jump into this, but you have Noah, then you have today, but somewhere in between here is Atlantis.
we're already at 48 minutes and we're supposed to be 20.
But this is
Yeah,
maybe another subject for another time to open
absolutely. Yeah.
the because we've just like I said, we're only just looking at this little piece so far today, but we touch back a little bit because you need those reference points to this is bigger than just this pyramid Egyptian today that we know. It's bigger.
Our
Who
our human history is far deeper, far more expansive, and far more than we're ever supposed to know for some reason. That's what
I like.
frustrates me.
You ever watch Star Trek? It's such an imaginative program that lets you have teleports and you can boom and go and rematerialize. I think that place was maybe like Egypt in the ancient time. You know, and I have fun with this, and actually, it's part of the reason I want people to jump out the box and join in the conversation. What was it really like? How could they take the soul of the body and send it to a star and come back and get up and walk around? Those are the things that interest me. And your audience can ask questions. What kind of world would it take? What kind of power to send my soul to the stars and come back and wake up? Hi, everybody. 1,000 years went by. Oh, that was just a day for me over there. It's the fun of it.
I wouldn't even know how to wrap up this episode, eh?
It isn't. It isn't a wrap up. It's a continuation. I mean, you just kind of opened the door into to. I'm 73. You think you're going to get it in 48 minutes?
No, of course not. Well,
How
it's
long
only
have you known me now? And every time I think I can give you new things that you never
four
heard
or five.
before.
I think I've known you 4 or 5 years now, roughly. Because I was the last time I was in Egypt was 2019.
And most of the time, you can't open a door until somebody's ready to receive the information that's going to come out. There's a layering of conditions, so to speak, allowing you to let go of organized religion and seeing religion as something greater than their application of it. Because it's spiritual, it's the power of the soul, it's the connectivity of you and me. And I guess the strongest thing of it is love. Love is where it manifests. And if you don't have that,
Well, for some people, it isn't so much the religion that's given them those fundamental beliefs from their childhood. You could argue it's the educational institutions that did a lot of damage as well in limiting people's perceptions of what's possible and probable and history itself. So we've
well,
given. I'm going to try and wrap up if that's all right, because
that's kind of what I'm doing too. The wrap up is that we have opened doors. We haven't wrapped it up in the sense that this is the end of this conversation. I mean, really, if you want to follow this pursuit of truth, I say stay tuned. Now, you've known me for a long time, and this is your first attempt at sharing my experiences combined with yours to people that we don't even know, but are in dire need of a new and truthful truth, not another reality. But to see water and history and this, it's amazing. And history isn't taught that way. It should be. What do you mean teaching history that way? Well, if that boat is 7,000 feet, what is the history behind it? Don't just say, it's, I don't know it. Okay, what's next? And we forget everything? Connect.
well, what I was trying to do with the web of life philosophy is try and get people to change their perception of themselves. But in order to focus your perception on yourself and take a more objective view of the self instead of a subjective view of the self, I asked them to zoom out first and look through the world sphere before looking through the societal or the social sphere to then look at the self or the personal sphere. So now that we've zoomed all the way out and we're looking at world history, but we're also,
Universal, not just world.
yeah, but also their perspective of the world. If your perspective of the world hasn't been able to shift at all just based off the information that you've presented in this episode, I'm going to be kind of flabbergasted, because once you're learning to shift your perspective of the world and history and beliefs and science and energy and childhood and experiences, all of the fundamental elements of life, if you can separate what you used to think and where you got those thoughts and beliefs from when it comes to the world, then it becomes a lot easier to detach from the beliefs that you hold yourself about all the 8 fundamental elements. But specifically, because of the content that we've focused on here, the pyramids might mean a lot to some people. It might just be a mystery to some people, or it might be something that they've really wanted to solve, something that they want to understand. And so what I said in the last episode, Laz, was for some people, having the mystery of the pyramid solved will actually answer far more about the self than true self exploration of the individual. It will tell you more about your abilities and possibilities.
But the point is that those things are to this day denied to you as a listener or someone seeking the truth. Me, I sit in wonderful offices and important people when I'm in Egypt. And if I'm sitting in the office, I kind of hate to point this finger this way, but the guy that has all the keys to every door of every tomb that's up there, and he asks me, Larry, is there anything you would like to see? Because he has the keys, I know, and we joke a little bit. He's a good friend too. So I look at him, the Tomb of the Birds. No, I've been there. No, I know this. No, General, I can't think of anywhere. But then I look at him in the end of it, and he says to me, because he knows a lot about me. You don't just run up there without them having investigated you. But he said, Larry, when they open this up, it will change the world. So what I'm looking at is the unclean hands, is the antiquities mafia has control of everything. They've given the Arab League 40-year contract on the Great Pyramid. Egypt, what are you doing? So things like that, the corruption is so bad. And to me, if I knew exactly what I think I do, where certain things are, I would never tell until the administrations that are controlling it are gone. Because if they get to those places, they will alter the truth of what's hidden. Because it can't be opened until those times are correct. Even if I've been down there and wooed and poured water and listened to the steps and all the things necessary to take you down where what I would feel is the records that supposedly were left by the Atlanteans, which were long, long before the Egyptians in Egypt. But those are things that they, as the government, has to change. We've got the whole Middle East now is crazy. Tourists aren't going there. Their people are, we don't have any business. Yeah, because the time is changing where the name Israel will be terror in the names in the ears of the listeners in that part. And the scriptures say that 5 roads will come out of the Syrian nations into Egypt. Those nations are already there, are the roads. And Egypt will absorb because of what's going to happen in the days ahead. And now that's a promise that's written in stone that isn't in hieroglyphs or English, it's in geometry. And the geometry unfolds by the calendar.
There's something I've been dying to ask you, and I hope you give me the stock standard answer. Why aren't you an Egyptologist, Laz?
I told them, they both, you know what, you really want to know. And this is when I was investigating Hawass for breaking the shoulder of the Sphinx many years ago. Another story, as I'm telling you, is full of them. But they had me in their offices and they said, why aren't you an Egyptologist? And I says, really, you want to know? And they said, yeah. These are generals. I know. They're in Manuel Palace if we take the day and time. But anyway, I looked at him and I says, I didn't want a degree in stupidity.
That's my favorite line. Yeah.
And I said to him, but I would be happy to sit down and discuss how I spent my $100,000 and
The
so I'm an
knowledge that
independent
you gained
researcher.
from it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How many of you have written patents on the geometry controlling sunlight? How many people of you have been underneath and really want to tell us that you could put the Sistine Chapel in Rome underneath the rivers that flow underneath the plateau? Stories that are there by people that have been and documented it. And in your country, in Australia, J.J. Hurtak released a film of him river rafting underneath the plateau of the Great Pyramid. Now, I don't make that stuff up, but you don't hear those stories either. But see, I'm sort of abstract. Everything comes into my head, I filter it, suspend disbelief or whatever until, yep, yep. Hakeem Aliyan, you know this man?
We're going to have to
I
stop.
know, but real quick, he was in Saqqara. He went underground all the way from Saqqara to the Great Pyramid. Do you hear that story too much? Well, and allowed him to do that. There's miles and miles of tunnels. And if you want me back again, I'll be happy to come. You got maybe 1 minute left. Did y'all have fun? I did. Thank you for sharing out loud these things, and I hope that they enlighten you and take you further on the road of inquiring and checking for truth, not bullshit. Can I say that word?
You can say whatever the hell you want. It doesn't matter. I think one day it would be worthwhile to do a bit of a live stream somewhere so that people can ask questions in chat or jump on for a quick call and stuff. I think that'll be worthwhile because a lot of your knowledge, especially the scientific mathematical stuff, it's really wasted on me because I don't process that information with ease. But hopefully we've enabled people to suspend belief enough to challenge their beliefs enough that they can start to think outside the box of the pyramid, the planet, the universe, and then ultimately themselves.
Well, we're living in the age where the world is flat.
I
And
gotta stop
somebody
here.
has
Hang on. I gotta just finish up and then we'll keep talking. All right. So thanks for being here with me for this ep. New ones will come out for you every other Thursday. If you'd like to get your hands on a copy of the book, please head to my website, www.weboflife.au. And while you're there, you can download the free PDF of the complete Web of Life philosophy. All the links are included in the show notes. Also in the show notes, I'm going to put a link to an episode of Beyond Belief with George Norrie featuring Larry Dean Hunter for you to see some more information and some actual artifacts that he's collected from his over 40 years and over 45 trips to Egypt in his lifetime. So what did I, yeah. If you'd like to stay up to date with the world of Ali Amo, follow me on socials. Oh my God, that was a whole hour. Hang on, you can't go anywhere.